All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Rick, for handling that. So I think it's time to get started here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit my little share screen here. And so you should all now be seeing a PowerPoint slide that just has the title of our training for today, which is how to submit your conflict of interest disclosure in InfoEd. You can see that there are 3 of us on the call today that are part of the system support team. So in our next slide, we have there we go. We have our names and faces here. So my name is Jamie Venata. I am the InfoEd systems admin, which means I know about as much about the system as anybody else at UT. So I'm the one who helps make the system do what we want it to do. With me also is Stacy Wisniewski. She is our training and support person. So she and I are your frontline people for when there's a question or a concern or a how does this work. Though we are your people for that. And then the fearless leader of our merry little band is Dr. Rick Francis. So that's your InfoEd support team here at the University of Toledo. And we are responsible for making it better, implementing changes, and making sure that it works well for the whole group. Also with us today is Dr. Gary Rafey, and he is our compliance analyst for the conflict of interest. And so if you have questions about how the system works, you ask our team. If you have questions about what you need to do and why you need to do it, Gary is going to be your person. So I will give Gary a second here. Do you want to say anything, Gary?
No, I think you've got it covered there, Jamie. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So also Gary's preferred email for contacts about COIs and disclosures and things like that are up on the screen right now, but I'll have Stacy copy that into the chat as well so that anybody can copy that down if they want it for later. Okay. All right, so this is our presenting team for today, and I'll be doing most of the talking today. However, Stacy will be taking over trainings, future trainings from me after today. So. All right, so before we start, a little bit of housekeeping. Number 1, if you want to turn on live captions for yourself, we are recording this, and so there will be a captioning along with the recording. But if you want to do it for yourself right this moment, it's in the Teams meeting. It's in the More menu, the 3 little dots, and then when you click that, it'll be in language and speech. When you click that, you can turn on live captions. So if you want to read what we're saying at the same time as we're saying it, that's how you do it. Please feel free to post questions in the chat. Stacy and Rick are both monitoring the chat and they can respond to you there, or if they feel like it's important, they will interrupt me and bring it to the attention of the whole group so I can answer it for everyone. Please also feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt if you'd like to. I'm not offended, and I'd much rather just get your question answered in the moment rather than trying to hold everything until the end. This is going to be a relatively short presentation, is my hope. So I don't feel like it'll be too bad to have just interrupt in the moment if you'd like to. So feel free to raise your hand, feel free to unmute your microphone, but for the time being, if everybody could stay muted, just so we don't get a bunch of background noise, that would be great. All right, so that's our housekeeping. Let's see here. All right, so today our agenda is we're just going to do a quick overview of the conflict of interest disclosure process. We're actually going to do a demonstration of the COI disclosure in InfoEd, so you'll see it real time live as I'm doing it. And also in InfoEd, the way we're going to request new entities. So if you have a relationship with a company that isn't already in InfoEd, we will be describing the way that you will request that entity be added and available to you to use in your disclosure. And then we'll leave some time at the end for some questions and for resources. So does anybody have any questions right now before we get started? All right. So our quick little overview here, I just want to hit on some points that like what is not changing, what is staying exactly the same. If you've done a COI disclosure in our current COI site, what's staying the same? And the answer is we have not changed any of the disclosure requirements. So the same kinds of things need to be disclosed, the same kinds of things that didn't need to be disclosed before still don't need to be disclosed. You still need to update your disclosure annually. at least annually, and you still need to make updates to your disclosure within 30 days if you have a relationship or a financial interest that changes. So all of those are policy level kinds of things, and none of that has differed either from the old system to the new system. What is changing? So everyone is going to be required to now submit their disclosures using the InfoEd program. So it is a web application, just like the old one, but it's obviously a bigger framework, and it connects proposals and awards. Eventually, we're going to have our whole research enterprise in InfoEd. So unfortunately, even if your current disclosure is not expired, you are still going to have to redo your disclosure in InfoEd. We are not there. The systems are too different. We were not able to port over or legacy import any kind of disclosures from the old system. So everybody will be starting with effectively a clean slate and starting over in InfoEd. So we will be starting as of October 2nd, allowing people to log into InfoEd and do their disclosure in InfoEd. The other thing that's different is that previously, if you had to request a new entity, there was no vetting processing with that. And so you just input the entity and then said what your relationship with that was. There's now going to be an intermediate step where there is a vetting for that entity, which means there's two separate processes. You might go into your disclosure, attempt to add a relationship, realize that the entity doesn't exist, and then you basically have to stop there and move over to a separate process to request that entity. So that is a little bit different, and it does require a little bit of extra time. So please keep that in mind when you are trying to do this disclosure in a timely manner. If you have some other deadlines that need to be accommodated, you might need some extra time to get your entities in. Now, I do want to mention that we did bring over entities from the previous COI system. So if you had an entity already, and it met our criteria for needing to be brought over, like it was connected to your current disclosure, or it was within the last, I think, 2 years, we did import those. So those entities should be available to you, but we didn't bring over everything. And obviously we didn't bring over the disclosures, as I said. So what else is going to be different? You will receive an email confirmation as soon as you've done your disclosure. So you click submit on your disclosure, and you're going to get an email right away that says we've got it. So that's kind of reassuring. We never had that before, so some people got confused. Did I finish the process? Did I not finish the process? You will get a positive confirmation in your email of your completion of the disclosure. And also, one of the pieces that's kind of exciting is that when you get added to a project, the PI or the people on the project will be able to see the status of your disclosure at the time that you are added to that project, which means that if you are missing a disclosure or your disclosure has lapsed, it will be readily apparent, and your PI could encourage you to update that earlier. Or if you're a PI, you can encourage the people that have missing or expired disclosures to get in there and get that done earlier, because that is one of the things that holds up allowing release of funds. So when your proposal is eventually funded, your COI, that's when all of those conflicts of interest get reviewed. And if we're waiting for people to do their disclosures, then that's just a little bit more delay, and we can be a little bit more proactive because it'll be visible to you right up front. None of the details are visible, just the status of the disclosure itself. Is it there or not there? So that is our overview of what is staying the same and what is changing. Does anybody have any questions at this moment? All right, well, then our next little task here is to actually log into InfoEd. So what I have is, I just brought up a brand new browser, and hopefully you guys are seeing my browser right now, right? One of my team?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
it's there.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. All right. So we have production and development and test environments. So I've got links all the way across here. These, obviously, you won't need any of these. We will have the production environment link available to you at the end of this presentation. Please remember, though, you're not allowed to get into it until October 2nd. And I say not allowed with big air quotes around it, because some people their accounts are active right now. So, but please wait until October 2nd to do your disclosure in our production environment. For today, I'm just going to show you that we're going to log into our test environment. But the first thing I want to show you is if you are a UT person, when you either in your prod environment or your test environment, when you first go to that URL, it's actually immediately going to take you to your University of Toledo Tower login page. So no extra clicks or anything. It just takes you immediately to this login page, and I can log in, but then I'll be myself, and that's not particularly useful for our demo today. So instead, what I am going to do is I am going to log in to a demo user account. And oops, in order to do that, I actually have to go to a slightly different link. So this is the same site. It is still our test environment, but it is a different link. So there we go. Okay, so I am logged in as someone named Demo PI. This is a person who is just a typical researcher. They don't have any special powers or anything. And this is what we call the portal or the landing page. So by default, you have some kind of features here that are the same across the board. We have a blue bar. We call this the top menu. Across the top here, we have a side left menu here, and then we have this kind of gray space in the middle with the widgets in it. So these white boxes, we call them widgets. That is a InfoEd term, InfoEdism, but you'll become more familiar with those as time goes by. Things look a little bit strange because I have this on my smallest monitor because I wanted to see what it looked like, and also usually that presents better, but unfortunately there's a little bit of overlap with this button. So apologies for the slightly ugly button, but our widgets, the ones that are both displayed here in this gray screen, are the two that we're going to talk about today. So these widgets will appear for you automatically. You won't have to do anything. They are required to be on your screen. But as you get used to using InfoEd, you do have the ability to configure these widgets. So you can click down here in this little portal configuration. There'll be additional widgets for you to be able to add to your screen. And you can also change where things are located on the screen. So knowing that your disclosure is going to be an annual thing and you're almost never going to need an entity request, you might add some widgets to the top that'll push these down. Just for example, I'll move the COI entity request one over to a different column, and then you'll see that now I have them in two different columns. So you get basically two columns. You can manipulate those widgets as you see fit for yourself. But that's kind of an advanced feature that we don't need to go too deeply into right now. So from your landing page, two widgets: financial conflict of interest, COI entity request. You only need to do this one if you can't finish this one. So you only need to do COI entity request when you can't find what you're looking for that's already in the disclosure.
Jamie,
So,
since you may have been already heading this direction, since so many folks are going to have brand new disclosures because no one's in InfoEd yet, did we grab a screenshot of what this looks like when it's the first time you ever create one?
We did indeed. So I actually just had this, the widget itself looks kind of different when, my video, there we go. Fancy. So the widget itself looks slightly different when you first log in, and it does have this create initial disclosure button instead of the two buttons that you saw. So when you guys first log in as researchers to do your first disclosure, you will see a single button to choose. However, as soon as you click that button, from then on, for the rest of your life in InfoEd, there will always be two buttons. So this is I want you to not be afraid, obviously, that there's only one button, but it doesn't last for very long. So it'll go away here very shortly. So you can see I was going to mention here that Demo PI has already done a disclosure. In fact, already today, because I was testing, go figure. So it does tell you when the last disclosure was. And then you have basically two buttons down here: view previously submitted and update or recertify. And if you're in the middle of a disclosure, like you had to walk away for a little bit or you had to go request a COI entity, then this would say actually finish disclosure in process. So this button might change text depending on the context, whether you've completed one or whether you're in progress. So it should be very clear which buttons you would need to use to get to your disclosure to do the action that you're needing to do. So I'll just show you really quick this view previously submitted disclosure. So this is just a PDF. It is very small. Apologies for that. But it is just a PDF printout of the entire disclosure form that we are just about to look at. So you can get this, you can get your previous disclosure. It is timestamped at any time. You can see exactly when you last disclosed and what you last said. So just want to point that out. That's available to you at all times. So I want to, actually, I'm going to take a little tiny detour here, and I'm going to move another window over here. This is a different user, and this is another John. This is John PI. So I'll make him. He's another of our generic users. And what I wanted to do with John PI was to show you what it looks like when you have no financial interest to disclose. So John PI also did his most recent disclosure today because, again, I was testing. But for John PI, he doesn't have any financial relationships that need to be disclosed. He's read the policy, and he has decided that nothing he has is needs to be disclosed. So if it came up on a year and it was John PI's time to recertify, he's just going to click this button, update recertify. And this is going to bring up what's called an e-form. So an e-form is just an electronic form. It's kind of a generic term. You'll also notice that InfoEd likes to stack windows. So there are 2 windows here now. So it might look like something may have disappeared, but in fact, it's probably just behind something else. It's just something that we're going to have to get used to. It's the way they do things. But our e-form here is really, it's a very simple thing. So it has 3 pages of guidance first to start out with. So you land on this general information, which helps you to decide what do I need to think about. And in bold here, when in doubt, err on the side of disclosing. So it gives you some sense of what you should be considering when you think about what you need to disclose. Then there are some examples of things that you should be disclosing. So you'll notice that there are previous and next buttons here. You can use the previous and next buttons to navigate. You can also use the side menu to navigate. So you're going to read through what does need to be disclosed. It gives some examples. It is not an exhaustive list of all the things that need to be disclosed, but it does give you some of the more common situations. Also note at the bottom of each one of these pages, there is a link to the policy, and there is also a link to the email to get your questions answered. So if you come up with a question in the middle of this and you're like, oh, I need to know, I don't understand this, or I have a weird situation, you can use that email to contact Gary right away. So we have what needs to be disclosed, then we have what does not need to be disclosed. So again, these are examples of things that you would not need to include in your disclosure. Also not exhaustive, but the typical things that people might think they need to and then decide and then realize they don't need to. So on page 4 is the first page that we actually have any meaningful questions for the researcher. This is all just informational. And then so we go to this page and it says, do you or your immediate family have anything to disclose? And if you can answer that question, no, after reading through all of these and understanding the guidance and understanding the policy, then this disclosure is very simple. You answer no, you can click next or move down. You attest that you really truly have nothing, and you submit. And that is the end. So once you have decided that there is nothing to disclose here, it's very simple. Answer no, checkbox, click submit. So I'm not going to do that right this second. I'm going to move to the scenario where there is something to disclose, because then obviously things get just a little bit more complicated. But for the time being, does anybody have any questions about the no external financial interest situation? All right, I've stumped everyone already, or we're doing all right. So I'm just going to minimize.
Just to
Go ahead.
reiterate, that save button is available so that if you get partway through or you get distracted or you've got a situation you have to quick pivot to, you can hit save and whatever you've done so far will be there and you'll be able to come back to it.
Yes, that's an excellent point. In fact, I'll demonstrate that in our next scenario here. So the John PI scenario was just, I've got nothing. How easy is this to do? So I can save this at this point if I want to, or I can submit it at this point. But in truth, I'm just going to go ahead and minimize all this and move back to my other environment, my other demonstrator, because my other demonstrator did have something to disclose. So again, this person has already done a disclosure. And so I'm going to click this update recertify. And that's going to open up my disclosure for editing. So I have the same 3 pages of guidance. So we've read them before, but it's good to keep reading them, go through them all carefully in case anything has changed. So I'll read through this and make sure everything is still the same. And then now in this case, I have my related financial interest statement and I have to say yes. So because I have previously disclosed and previously said yes, the disclosure, just like in the old system, keeps track of everything you'd previously said. So you don't have to re-enter the same stuff every year. All of your the first time you disclose an interest, it sticks with you until you say, I'm done. I need to remove this because I've divested or I'm no longer involved in that company or entity anymore. So in this case, the yes button was already ticked because my previous disclosure did have financial interests. And when I do that, I have this extra page to fill out. So as soon as I clicked yes, I got an extra page. And so this extra page is where we start adding those relationships. So for those of you who have used our COI website before, all of the data that we're collecting here is almost exactly the same as the data we have collected in the past. So in this case, you can see that I had previously entered a relationship with a company called USA Archery. And I have a relationship with them that is myself. I travel with the team, so I get travel reimbursements in the amount of about $14,000 a year. And I started doing this back in January of 2020, and I'm still doing it. So I have this opportunity to define this relationship. I also have an opportunity to write why I think this is important. And so this says basically it gives you a little text to describe what your relationship is with that company, in addition to the detailed parameters here, the detailed fields that you can fill out. So if I wasn't ongoing, if I was done with this, I can uncheck ongoing. I can put in an end date. If I didn't know what the value was, I could say value is not readily determined, and that takes away the value drop down. But in this case, it's a pretty simple relationship that I have with USA Archery, so I'm going to go ahead and just leave that there. So that came in from my previous disclosure, but the reason I'm disclosing today is because I have a new relationship that I need to disclose. So I am going to say that I am someone in the College of Education, and that I have now developed a consulting relationship with Toledo Public Schools. So in order to record that relationship here, I'm going to go ahead and just start typing the entity name. And as I type, you'll see the filtering, the list gets smaller and smaller. So I can type Toledo Public and I get to Toledo Public Schools. So I can just select that one. And then when I have found it, I click Select Entity. And that puts it down here into a whole new box. So now I've got a relationship with USA Archery and I have a relationship with Toledo Public Schools. And then now I need to add a new activity with them. So I click Add New, and then I define that relationship. So it's still me. I am doing consulting for them. I expect I'm going to make about 20,000 or so, a little less than that. And we'll say that I started this 9/1/2023 because I needed to report that within 30 days of it happening. So I have my begin date. It is, again, ongoing. And I can just say I am doing remote learning consulting with TPS. Okay, So I can save that. I get in the habit of just saving after everything I do, but it's a good habit to be in, but it's not required. You can keep adding things and save later. Also, my husband happens to work at TPS. So while I'm here, I'm just going to add another activity and interest underneath that TPS. So I'm going to go ahead and click add new. And I'm going to say it's my spouse and he is paid by them. And he doesn't make nearly enough because, you know, and he started back in January of 2020. So we can go ahead and just put the date in there and he's still working there. And I can say husband works as administrator for TPS. Okay. And then I can't leave a spell alone. Okay. So now I have two relationships with this same company. I have one relationship with this company, and now I am done. So I've added all of my relationships, my entities and my relationships with those entities here on this screen. And again, you can click save at any time. And I just do that kind of as a habit. And then when I click next to go to the next screen, I get a slightly different certification text. So now I'm saying I acknowledged I've read the policy, which was the same as the first acknowledgement. I have reviewed my current financial interests and they are up to date. And I understand that if they change in the next I have 30 days to recertify this disclosure. So when I click that select, I can say, okay, I acknowledge that. And then I'm just going to click submit. So while this processes, obviously don't close the window. It tells you not to close the window. But it is basically the same as the information that we currently have, that we currently collect in the coi.utoledo.edu website. So far, does anybody have any questions? All right. So it finished processing, and what it does is it just brings that back up for me to see. The buttons are gone, so submit and save are gone. You don't, you'll notice that they're gone, so that tells you that it also went through. You can just click the red X on here. There's no done button or anything else. You can review what you wrote, but everything here now is no longer editable. So everything here is locked down. So if you made a mistake, you would need to close this and go back and recertify again. So I can close this. And again, so my recertify button is right here. So I can open it back up. If I made a mistake, I can open it back up and recertify. The other thing that happened was I got an email, which I will bring up now and show you guys. So here's the email confirmation that goes to you as the researcher who clicked the submit button. You get immediate confirmation that your relationships have been recorded. So in this case, the disclosure indicated submitter has external financial interests. And so that goes directly to you guys. So you have, actually, that's the one, that's a different one, but let me open up this one. This is, there we go. Your financial conflict of interest disclosure was submitted successfully. So this is your success email. Sorry about the other one. An email, you might have noticed the other one actually is an email to your chair. So you as a researcher, if you aren't a chair, if you are a chair, then it just goes to you. But if you aren't a chair, then the chair also gets a notification that you have disclosed. So, and that's true whether you disclosed any financial interests or not. It's just a notification that you did your disclosure. End of story. So there aren't any details at this point about it. This is just a notification that it got done. So 2 notifications go out, one to you, one to your chair. So are there any questions at this point? Let me move these over.
Jamie, can you show them one more time the view previously submitted so that if they want to have a view of what they just submitted, what it looks like with the details, they can see it one more time?
Of course. Yep. So I'm still demo PI. Here's my view previously submitted. Again, it looks terrible because it's in a PDF and I put it intentionally on a tiny screen. So it's really hard. It's very small, but it does tell you like at 3:58, this is when we did that. And each one of the pages that was a page or a clickable link on the left side in the menu in the e-form is its own page in the PDF. So it's a little bit wasteful, I suppose, because these are all very small and these instructions could be on one page, but this is the way InfoEd does things. So there's my page 4 is my yes or no statement. Page 5 is my list of financial interests. So I have my USA Archery that was there from before, and I have my 2 new relationships with Toledo Public Schools, and then my attestation and certification statement. So all of it in one file. If you wanted to keep that for yourself, you could download that just like you download any other PDF. It is just a PDF. Or you can just leave it here for reference at some future point.
That is a bonus I'm finding with InfoEd. Your records are in a consolidated place that you have access to, so you don't have to constantly keep track of where you put what information.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, this is our system here is both, it's going to be financial conflict of interest, but it's also going to be your proposals, and everything is tied together. So it really does help. You're going to have one place to go for all things research proposal related. Are there any other questions? I see something. Is there something in the chat? I've got too many windows open here to.
No questions. I just put the email inboxes for people to use if they need to reach out to Gary or if they need to reach out to us. And I'm thinking you're probably going to show us how to request an entity if it does not currently exist in InfoEd.
That is the next step. All right. So, so now that I've disclosed, I could attempt to, I could update and recertify again, and I could go through this. If I'm looking for an entity that doesn't exist, so let's go back to my financial interests and let's go back to this start locating, try to locate. Let's say I'm also consulting for Lenawee schools up in Michigan. So I start typing LEN. And I get everything that has LEN anywhere in it, but it's not in here already. So shoot, that means I have to pause for a second because I need to describe this, and I can't select one of these that's not right. So I'm going to just go ahead and save it, and I'm going to close it. And then I'm going to go to my other little widget over here, which is called Request a New COI Entity. So I'm going to click on that button. And that's going to bring up yet another e-form. So as I said, this is a separate process, but it is still an e-form, just like your disclosure was, which is why it looks very similar. You get that same kind of instruction page, first page, that tells you like what kinds of things you should be requesting here, which may not have been clear from your disclosure, but if it's not, there's a little bit more information right here about what needs to happen and what doesn't need to happen. And when you're finished with the instructions and you still need to request this entity, you can click next, or you can click over here. And this is where you would fill in the information. So we are actually asking for less information here than we did in our COI website before. So that should be, we've eliminated some of the more complex entity or data collection. So I can just say this is, help me spell this, Stacy. Lenawee. So like that?
Lenawee, but we say Lenawee. Yeah, and there's no Lenawee public school, but there is Lenawee Christian school.
All right. Well, I'm gonna consult for them today.
There you go.
All right. So I would go to their website and I would figure out what their address was, but I'm not going to be that thorough today. And Lenawee, and that's in Michigan. So I'll click the little edit button here to find my state. I can just type MI and that will bring that up for me. And then 4844 something. I don't know. It's close enough. So that's a Michigan zip. And then in the country, obviously I have to collect United States. So I just click the U and there I can select United States. That's pretty easy. If there's a website, this is not required. All these other fields are required. But the website is not required. But if you happen to have one, it's helpful to have that entered there. And then also, again, you get a little box down here, which you can make bigger, by the way, if you just drag it. to describe why your relationship with this entity here, so that a decision can be made by our vetting person whether this should go into our new system. So part of the reason that we're doing this extra little bit here that's new and different and takes a little bit longer is because our entities that get entered into InfoEd are used across the board. So we're trying to keep this, the list of entities in InfoEd valid and tight and verified and not cluttered up with a bunch of stuff that may or may not belong. So one of the ways we're doing that is going through this little vetting process where you get to describe why you're requesting this entity to be added, and then Gary actually goes through and makes sure that they are a regular business and does all the checking to make sure that yes, this is indeed an entity that we need to add for the purposes of disclosure. So I am consulting for this school in remote learning. All right, so we'll go ahead and do that. And then that's all I need to do. I can just hit submit. And this request, you'll actually, I think you even get an email for this that says, thank you for your request. And then that request goes to Gary and he gets to read through it and figure out and do all of our vetting processes on that entity. So you will hear back from that process, whether your entity got added or if there was another entity that you should be using instead. For example, if you get too specific, let's say your entity that you request is the University of Michigan Press. And Gary would look at that and say, no, I think you just need to use the University of Michigan as a whole, not the specific subunit of the University of Michigan. So then you would get an email back that says basically, please use this entity instead of that entity. Or if there was a duplicate, for example, the spelling was slightly different. Any of those things could cause this to be sent back to you and say, oh no, here's an entity to use instead. Or there'll be an email that says, yeah, please go ahead. Or no, this isn't a valid entity, you shouldn't be using this, and here's why. So you will get a response regardless of what avenue it ends up taking when you do that COI entity request. But as I said, it is a separate process. It takes its own set of little time, and therefore don't wait to do your disclosure until the last minute, because you may need to do this side process as well. Does that make sense to everyone? Do you have any questions?
Makes sense to me. Looked really good.
All right.
Nicely done.
So you'll also notice that, by the way, while I was doing all that, this little button changed to finish disclosure in process. So that says to me that I started that disclosure, but then I saved and left and walked away because I had to do this other thing, or maybe I had something else I needed to do. And so now when I want to reopen that, when I get my response from my entity request, I can reopen it just by clicking that same button, finish disclosure in process, opens everything back up with everything that I saved in it automatically. All right. And if there are no other questions, I will flip back to my little PowerPoint here. And there we go. All right. And then I will skip to our next slide. So we have some upcoming training. We have another LOI. So if you are looking at the internal programs, the major programs that UT offers internal money for, some of those programs require a letter of intent. And so those will be submitted through InfoEd. And we have a webinar coming up on how to do that. We have another webinar that addresses this very topic coming up as well. So if you have people who you think would benefit from hearing this said again, if you want to come again, obviously, or if you want to invite your colleagues, then Stacy will be handling that one, thankfully. You won't have to listen to me again. Then we also have our upcoming the proposal / budget orientation. So that's the big one. That's for external programs that we're rolling this out in a staged way, in a staggered way. So initially, we're just going to roll it out for nonprofit organizations, and then we'll be moving into industry and for-profit companies, and then we'll be moving into local and state government, and then we will be taking on the big federal awards in February. So it's a staggered rollout. It's very slow. all of that information about which kinds of sponsors and when I should start doing those in InfoEd rather than using the existing mechanisms. That's all on our informational web page. So I'll get to that. I'll show that in a little bit. And we do have one in-person session scheduled for NSF specifically, and that's coming up in November. So we won't be doing federal submissions to NSF until January. So in the new year, so that November session is meant to be preparation for January submissions to NSF, and it will also cover some other federal agencies.
And just a quick plug here, since my role is really going to be the education and support piece. If you are a department chair or you believe that your department would benefit from some sort of specialized training for your department, please reach out to us and we will see what we can organize for you, just like we did with that November 8th submission over on the engineering campus. We want to make sure this information is getting to the most relevant audience in the most effective way that we can get it to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stacy. All right. So for more information, we have an FAQ and a resources webpage. So that's put up there. And I think Stacy's maybe already copied it to the chat or will shortly. If you have questions about InfoEd in general, how it works and what to do in it, that is our team. So that mailbox there is infoed@utoledo.edu, and that is our team. We will answer that as swiftly as we possibly can. And for today's topic, if you have questions specifically about COI, the content of your disclosure, or what or how you or why you need to disclose, that is going to be, please direct those questions to the coi.disclosure@utoledo.edu email. And I believe that is the end. So do we have any questions at this point?
This is Rick. I don't have a question. I just want to mention that you can find that frequently asked questions page or the InfoEd information page. Just go to utoledo.edu, and in the search bar, if you type in InfoEd, that'll be the first result.
Yes, that's true. You don't have to copy down the URL if you don't want to.
I would also mention that if you have details or specific sort of specialty topics that you'd like to see incorporated into the training, we would welcome that advice on how to improve the content and make sure that it's covering the things that are the most relevant to you.
Gary, do you have anything you would like to add?
Not this afternoon, Jamie. Thanks for asking.
Okay. All right. Well, then, if there are no other questions or concerns at this point, I will give you back 15 minutes of your day. Thank you very much, everyone.
Recording will be made available as soon as we can.